Okay guys, we're going to talk about farming for weapons, specifically the Season of the Drifter weapons, which are extremely good. I've actually been a huge fan of all of these weapons, but the problem was the drop rates. They were awful. But today with update 2.5.22, Gamete Prime and Reckoning has become a lot more forgiving in terms of drop rates. So first up, enemies in Reckoning have actually been adjusted. They actually have less health and do less damage to players. And across the board, we got an increased weapon drop rates inside of Reckoning and Gamete Prime. You also got an increase there in bad luck protection to each of those activities. So players should receive a reward after playing multiple matches without one dropping. Tier 3 Reckoning also has higher drop rates as it is more challenging. Now I was a tad bit skeptical, especially about the bad luck protection because we've heard of that before. But we also played Gamete for the past 4 hours, and I gotta say guys, the drop rates are substantially increased. I mean, it was raining. Now maybe not menagerie levels of rain, at least early on in Season of Opulence, but much better than what it was before. Matter of fact, it was stated that Gamete Prime in general has about a 60% chance of dropping a weapon every single game. This was essentially my loot haul today, and yeah, it was pretty good. None of these I would say are god rolled, but they are definitely not bad at all, and I'm probably gonna keep most of these. Now with that being said, I want to get rid of the confusion today about Spare Rations, because a lot of people are asking me, why not just run Reckoning? Tier 2 and Tier 3 Reckoning, guys, has its loot pool split. This is a perfect illustration here. On the top, you have Swords, which has the chance to drop the Sidearm, Lonesome, Last Man Standing, Night Watch, Soul Survivor, and Just In Case. And underneath that is Oryx. Now, Oryx has a chance of dropping Spare Rations, Bug Out Bag, Gnawing Hunger, Doomsday, and Outlast. Now, the reason why you didn't see me doing Reckoning today during the stream is because it is Swords this week. Next week will be Oryx. So obviously, we'll be jumping into Reckoning next week for those of us still trying to get that God roll Spare Rations. But even so, the Gamete Prime drop rates were super nice today. So I wouldn't even say you have to wait until next week to get started on this farm here for Spare Rations. Now, if you want to just go ahead and split it up and get that Last Man Standing with 1-2 punch, get that God roll Night Watch for whenever scout rifles do get a buff, that Soul Survivor, by all means, go right ahead. And yes, we're going to talk about each one of those weapons and which ones to look for. Primarily today, I just wanted to clear up the confusion about how loot works, because I think there's a lot of people that were not really involved with Season of the Drifter. So for those that are on the hunt for a Spare Rations this week, you're going to want to do Gamete Prime. But in doing so, you also have access to get all of these other weapons in Gamete Prime as well. So the loot pool is broader, which means starting next week when Oryx rotates in as the Reckoning boss, I would highly advise jumping into that activity. And it was stated earlier today by DMG on Reddit, you should get a drop in Prime or Tier 2 Reckoning by at least your 4th match completion. And then he stated you should get a drop in Tier 3 by your 2nd successful completion. And he said every 4th completion. I'm gonna be honest with you, I did not go 4 Gamete games in a row without getting a drop. I got a drop at least every 3rd game, which is still really good and way better than what it was before. Now, for my folks that are actually trying to snag a Spare Rations, what is considered the God roll? Because we come back and forth to this so many times. So I'm just going to tell you the 2 rolls that I'm looking for. So for PvP, I want Rapid Hit and I want Rampage. I want 2 perks there that are just specifically making this weapon type more consistent. Of course, something like Ricochet Rounds and Full Bore is the way to go, as that increases range, but that is like the ideal PvP role for myself. Now for PvE, pretty much the same thing, except obviously you can add a little more lethality here, and really it's a toss-up. Rampage, Swashbuckler, multi-kill clip, it all comes down to your playstyle. Hell, even kill clip. And not that none of those traits would work inside of PvP. I'm just purely pointing out the role that I'm specifically looking for. And out of all these things, I could probably survive with anything in that final column. The main thing that I want is I want Ricochet Rounds, Rapid Hit, and Full Bore or Hammerforge. Some sort of barrel perk that is boosting our range. And of course, a range masterwork. So that's ideally what I'm going for this week, guys, as well as next week when Oryx comes through. But I do want to mention that all of these Season of the Drifter weapons, they're extremely unique. They have perks on them that are only found on them. So if you take something like Doomsday, Full Court is a perk only found on that grenade launcher, which of course increases the damage of the weapon the further you shoot the grenade. And then when you look at something like Survivor. Firing line, which increases precision damage when 2 or more allies are standing near you. Again, these are very unique traits, and they're only found on these weapons, which is why these weapons are worth going after. So if you happen to get a drop this week from either Reckoning or Gamete Prime, don't scrap it. Look at it. Make sure it doesn't have one of these unique perks on it. And even if it might look like garbage, keep it. I have not actually individually reviewed these traits with these weapons, but we will be doing so this week. As like I said before, we think they're gonna have a very good place next season with Shadowkeep. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.